Welcome to the International Code Council Region 1 and Region 1 Radio Show. My name is Tim Spears. I'm the host of Region 1 Radio. Region 1 was established in 2014 and we're made up of 3 states, California, Nevada, and Hawaii. That also includes many ICC chapters. We are dedicated to excellence in education and engagement to promote a safer environment by bringing individuals together. Our podcast aims to provide valuable information and insights to professionals in the building and fire safety industry. We cover a wide range of topics, such as industry updates, best practices, and we interview experts in the field. We also aim to engage our listeners by discussing many relevant topics. Whether you're a code official, a building inspector, architect, engineer, or someone that's interested in the building and fire safety industry, our podcast is for you. We believe by bringing individuals together to share knowledge and resources, we promote a building safety environment and contribute to the betterment of our communities. So if you want to stay informed and up to date on the latest developments in the building safety industry, be sure to tune in to ICC Region 1 Radio. In this episode of ICC Region 1 Radio, I spoke with Chief Stephen Hrustich, Project Manager for Vision 2020. We examined community risk reduction and emphasized its expansive nature beyond just fire prevention. Chief Hrustich shared his insights on the power of data and risk mitigation. We also highlighted Vision 2020 and the initiative for pushing community risk reduction integration in the U.S. Fire Service and its many key resources that are available. We concluded the episode by reviewing the 2024 Community Risk Reduction Week and how you can engage with Vision 2020 online. All right, Stephen, welcome to ICC Region 1 Radio. How are you?
Very good. Thanks, Tim. I got to congratulate you on your award that you just received. I heard about that, and that's a wonderful thing. Great group.
It feels
folks.
pretty good. You know, it's one of those things that we have. This is I want to say the 3rd year of the podcast. We have, interviewed quite a few people. And one of the areas that is, I don't want to say one of the areas is lacking, but one of the areas that I want to, go a little bit more in depth in is community risk reduction. And I'm glad that you're able to join us. But yeah, it was good to attend the ICC conference and be able to share and be able to at least be recognized for all these efforts, and hopefully be able to usher in the next generation of, fire code or building code officials. So,
yeah, that's just a different realm, I think, from when we look at the fire departments and the way those things are broken up. That the discipline sort of gets set off to the side here, and I think this discussion will bring everything full circle.
Yeah, and I think, community risk reduction for me, I've been in the fire service now for almost 20 years, and now that I think back about it. And I've seen a lot of evolution, and I'm sure you have too. And community risk reduction is kind of slowly crept in, and I don't want to say slowly crept in because it's always been there, but it's now one of those trendy buzzwords that a lot of people say that they're doing community risk reduction, but they truly don't quite understand what community risk reduction is. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because I think that that's going to be an important topic that, a lot of times we talk about fire prevention, and truly that is community risk reduction, but that's only one element to, I think, an overall plan.
So true, and I'm sure we'll approach that topic in depth.
Absolutely. Well, let's start first with your background. So can you walk us through your journey in the fire service? So you started in the fire service up in, like we just talked about, up in New York, and then you've obviously had some different leadership roles throughout your time in the fire service, and then also now with the community there with the Vision 2020 project. So can you walk us through that background and what led you up to where you're at now?
You bet. Started back in 1984, believe it or not. So this is my 40th year spending time in and around the fire service.
Long time.
Seeing things from many different angles. So during that time frame, really did every single job in the fire department. I was a company officer. People think I spent a lot of time in the prevention side of things. But that's really not the case. Through that first sort of 28 years, and I was in mostly operations the whole time. So I got, company officer level and moved in and out of the code enforcement office a number of times. Just I had a little different skill set that they needed at the time. Looking at computerizing things and
Hmm.
whatnot. So my background sort of lent to that. People always ask me, you're doing sort of these things, and what gives you the background to do that? So my background is really my education's in computer science and mathematics.
Okay.
And so I was always that person that looked at things from many different sides. I'm a data geek. You can call me that. But I understood there's probably better ways to do some of these things. Now,
Yeah.
when you build those in, having a good understanding of unionized environments and things like that
Hmm.
is very helpful. But in New York, spent time in again every level of the organization. Retired as fire chief from multiple organizations in New York, and went to Atlanta. And I was assistant chief in Gwinnett County, Georgia. So Gwinnett, huge sort of area northeast of the city of Atlanta, 453 square miles, 31 stations, 1,100 some odd people in the fire department. Now they're running over 100,000 calls a year. So it gave me that sort of, from a smaller organization. I was a volunteer before I even started in the career fire service. So I sort of understood things from many different perspectives. I spent time again in Gwinnett. I was a fire
Hmm.
marshal there, but I headed up the community risk reduction division, which was at the time it was the fire investigations
Okay.
division, the fire and life safety educators, and of course the fire marshal's office. So big metropolis,
Yeah.
and I always told fire chief there, listen, if something's going to happen, good or bad, it's going to happen here. It was just one of those places
Yeah.
that was a magnet for anything, good or bad. So
Right.
that was a wonderful experience there in Gwinnett. And then left Gwinnett in 2018, or late 2018, early 2019, and I was already working with Vision 2020, and my
Hmm.
predecessor, Jim Crawford, he
Right.
said, listen, it's time for me to retire. What are your thoughts about sort of taking this over? And, I knew they were looking for someone with a different skill set, someone that had experience at fire chief level that
Right.
could really, understand this and help, you know,
Take it to
bridge
the
that
next level,
gap.
right?
Right, bridge
Yeah.
that gap from just fire prevention people to the other
Right.
99% of the fire department in operation. So that was the story that got me here, and it's been a great journey. I tell you that.
So I kind of want to dive in a little bit into your education. You mentioned that you were a computer science, mathematics. So what led you into that? From that, and maybe did you earn that while you were working in the fire service, or did you find that to be a need and then ventured into that area?
Well, the plan was, the master plan was in New York. It was 20 and out. So I
Uh,
saw myself. I started in the fire department before I was 21. So I could have retired when I was 40.
right.
And through that growth process, all firefighters have a second job. Whether
Yep.
we're carpenters, painters, we cut grass, we do whatever.
Right.
I just happened to work at Lockheed Martin Federal Systems. I worked
Okay.
on Marine One helicopter, F-15 projects, and special operations aircraft. Worked supporting the avionics for that, and
Okay.
and I think that was really what gave me sort of a great experience into understanding big data, right? From
Right.
back when big data wasn't anything,
Yeah.
and so carrying that on. But I always had the love for the fire service, and found it when I got close to that time to retire. I said, "Geez, I really don't want to retire. Want to carry this out. There's a lot of great things that can be done here."
Hmm.
I started working with the National Fire Academy,
Yeah.
went through the EFO program, and that's really, where I saw this love for community risk reduction sort of take off. We were
Right.
doing these things in New York back in 2000 when,
Yeah.
this wasn't even a word coming out of anybody's
No.
mouth. So, that experience again was something that really helped me understand what good really could be, and the
Right.
importance of identifying things, identifying the changes that occur or are going to
Hmm.
occur in your community, and what you can do to put yourself in the position to help get out in front of those things.
Right. And, most of what we do in community risk reduction and really now in the fire service, we're so data driven. And we have to be data driven to be able to make good decisions and have analytics. And that's one of those powerful skills to be able to have. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But before we do that, and before I forget to do it, we should probably define for those that are listening what community risk reduction is, and really what purpose does it serve. Like that's one of the things and why it's important. We kind of hinted to it a little bit, but what is community risk reduction and why is it important not only to the fire service but really the entire community?
So, the definition is really simple, right? What we do is identify risks within your community. Typically, when we talk to fire departments, we talk from a fire perspective. Well, it may be a tiny portion
Hmm.
of your total response that you do in your community. It's important to have that discussion revolve around fire, because you will shut people off immediately if we start talking about other slip, trips, and falls and other
Right.
things. That will come naturally, I think, when we understand our risk is broad,
Hmm.
and having the ability to look not only at fire, but look critical infrastructure, look at
Right.
special hazards in your community.
Hmm.
Those really are the tie to operations, and
Yep.
and I think that's where we sort of can set a hook in to make some hay, if you will,
Hmm.
to get operations more involved with community risk reduction, right? And in
Right.
those pieces of the puzzle. But the data piece, that we have the data. In 2016, this was sort of a real big push. Everybody said, we heard all the time, our data's terrible, our data's terrible.
Hmm.
And my take on that was, I don't believe that's true.
Hmm.
I think at the highest levels, firefighters get this right, right? And when they go to a fire, typically we record that we went to a fire. We'll
Right.
obviously maybe miss some things in the reporting.
Hmm.
Police do a much better job when they talk to somebody. They know who that person is, the age of that person, their gender, whatever.
Yeah. Their
That's just
address,
things.
how we can get a hold of them again if we need to. Uh,
So that's I think a big piece of how we can get better. And
right.
we've learned over time, since 2016, that process to get better is
Hmm.
fairly simple. And what we need to do is really give the data back to the
Yeah.
people that create it. In Gwinnett, when we did that, it was like a light bulb went on for these folks. And our data collection process, jumped from this level to much, much higher, just by giving that data back. They looked at it, saw, and they found an interest in what they had never seen things at that level before.
Are you saying give the data back not only to operations but also community members and really any of our stakeholders that have an interest in that data?
I think that's totally true, right? When we create a community risk assessment, that's not just for our organization, that is
Right.
for your community.
Yeah.
And we encourage people to put that out, have those discussions with partners, stakeholders, people that are engaged in your community that can help you make a difference. We always see, right, the resource side of things.
Hmm.
We always hear people say, we can't, we don't have people, we don't have time, we don't
Hmm.
have money. And those are just problems. And there's always a solution to the problem. That's
Yeah.
what I continue to push is, let's solve the problem. And once we get past that, right, it's like the movie The Martian, right? If you solve enough problems, you get to go home.
Right.
And I think this is really what we're looking at here. The people don't need to be yours. The money can come from other places. The time,
Hmm.
we spend time on what we value, right?
Right.
And this is something, when we look at firefighter cancer, when we look at mental health issues in the fire service, um, those things can be impacted and get us to the desired outcome. I'm using big CRR words now, that help, right, that help make the problem better.
Right.
Less firefighter suicide, less
Yeah.
firefighter cancer,
Hmm.
reduce mental health issues. So the data tells a story, and using that effectively, it helps us to really find solutions that work.
Hmm. Now you hit on the community risk assessment, and we always talk about, community risk reduction, defining the problem, and that community risk assessment is kind of that first piece. And I know that there's many of us out there that have maybe taken on a community risk assessment, and then just to find that I work a couple weeks and then it's too hard, right? Like you just mentioned, it's too hard. There's not enough time. There's, these things going on. And can you talk about the scalability of a community risk assessment? Because I think that that's one of the things that so many people think that it has to, you even talked about like incremental change in a sense. But can you talk about that scalability of a community risk assessment?
So, when we talk risk assessment, typically we call it a CRA-B, a basic risk assessment.
Hmm.
Looks at your top three fire problems, top three EMS problems, looks at critical infrastructure, looks at special hazards, and natural hazards of weather, things of that nature. So the scalability is really there. We've done this, and we've solved this problem. That I you hit it right on the head when you said people start this process,
Hmm.
but they don't complete it because they say, well, here's some data. How do I put this into a document? So
Right.
we noticed that in about 3-4 years ago, we started to develop that data collection and analysis course. And through that process, we deliver that course, say, okay, this is really good, but it's missing something. And what was missing really was a template for
Mm.
your community risk assessment. We
Yeah.
created that template, and now that template's went through 15 different revisions since we started. Every
Right.
time I get on a plane, I'd say, well, we need to add this. And it's pretty simple, from, a community profile standpoint, right?
Hmm.
That used to be we'd go to the Census Bureau and we'd spend a couple hours trying to dig through census
Yeah.
information. Now I can create the community profile in 30 seconds, right? With the
Yeah.
tools that are out there. Some of the tools for our data collection analysis class, we partnered with Broad Street, who,
Mm. Yep.
we can go on and look at your community, and it spits out all this information. It comes from the Census Bureau,
Yep.
but it allows us to sort of pick and choose and put these pieces of the puzzle into your risk assessment. And again, that risk assessment, what it's for is to generate discussions
Hmm.
on things, that can jump out and bite you or are biting you now,
Right.
that you want to prevent or you
Right.
want to mitigate the impact in your community. So from a scalability standpoint, now I see, right, a small volunteer organization or a small career department. This is really it's a 2-day process, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
was in Washington D.C. yesterday working with D.C. Fire, right? They run 220,000 calls a year, and one would think, oh my gosh, this is going to be, a
It's going
huge
to take
project.
forever to be able to do this CRA, right?
it it's really, I said this should not take us more than a week to complete. So that's the piece, right? It's
Yeah.
building in these little, like the template, and we'll talk about some other pieces that we realize over time. There's a massive gap here. How do we
Right.
solve that? And I think that's, from understanding what that data brings to the discussion really helps you move forward, in a big way, right? Across not only, this prevention realm, right?
Yeah.
And those folks got it. They were the early adopters of CRR.
Yep.
They're the ones that say, yeah, listen, we can get behind this. We understand, right?
Right.
This is just sort of a different way. Now, the operation side of things, that's where we made some major missteps. And I'm not being mean to anybody, but we made some major missteps 15 years ago
Right.
because we didn't put enough focus into the operation side, the 99% of the fire department.
Right.
And, now we're talking about firefighter mental health, cancer, whatever,
And,
service delivery, all
yep.
those pieces of the puzzle come out when you have those discussions with your risk assessment data.
Well, like you just said, having discussions and having discussions amongst your entire department. I talked to now retired Deputy Fire Chief Fire Marshal Greg Rogers in regards to community risk reduction, and he's like, it's really a culture change. It's a shift. It's really community risk reduction should touch everybody in the department, right? Everybody should have a piece in it, and you just hit on it. There are some important elements that I think over time we are now starting to maybe have a more broad view of it, more of a holistic approach or view of what truly community risk reduction is. And so many folks, when they kind of think about community risk reduction, they think about, well, it's fire prevention. It's just another trendy word to say fire prevention. Well, it's not. We want to try to be able to address some of these other challenges that we haven't addressed before in the past.
Yeah, and I think the difference there is really the way, right? When you look at CRR is not a program. We tell
Right.
everybody that it's not a
Yep.
program. It's a process, right? To
Yeah.
identify risk. And I don't care where if we're talking fire inspections, right? There's you obviously see risk there, and most people, right? Most people, I don't care who you are in the organization. I don't care if you're the fire chief. Many times they understand, okay, from an incident standpoint, we're running this many calls, and the day-to-day minutia of staffing rigs and doing all those things prevents us from looking deeper and understanding, okay, out of these calls, really, when we look at, if we look at fires, where are those fires occurring? And there's some that look and say, okay, our fire problems in one or two family homes or in
Right.
multifamily dwellings, a little bit in commercial. But if you look even deeper into that, understanding, your commercial occupancies, where are those fires occurring?
Mm-hmm.
And, where's the area of origin? All
Right.
that information, you have it.
Yeah.
We just never look that closely.
Uh-huh.
And once you're armed with that knowledge, it game on, right? You
Yeah.
can sit there and think about ways, right? Supporting fire and life safety system in your community, right? We know
Yeah.
when they're there, when they operate as designed, when they're tested and they're
Mm-hmm.
maintained, we get the outcome we desire, right?
Right.
Fires held in check, no fire fatalities and whatnot. We're not preventing the event from occurring,
Right.
but we're mitigating the damage.
Right. Yeah. Trying to minimize, reduce, right? As we talk about community risk reduction, the idea is trying to minimize that impact, whatever that incident is, whether or not it's a fire, a hazardous materials release, or whatever it is. And that's why I think about the fire code a lot of times where it says fire code, but there's so much in the fire code that is more, driven to reduce risk. I mean, there are so many elements. We talk about emergency planning, we talk about hazardous materials, so on and so forth. There are so many other things that we should probably, I don't want to say we're going to relabel the fire code because I don't think that'll ever happen, but maybe we make it but identify it, right? Identify that there are other elements that we are doing every day.
Yeah, and you make a great point there. One thing that I always focus on is where are those areas of code that we're really not applying
Right.
in our community.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest one for me, and this was a sort of big push maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, was fires in buildings under construction. Right, we had these type
Yeah.
5s that we were burning down city blocks.
Yep.
In Dallas, we had some folks that died in a large fire there. The fire code addresses that.
Yeah.
And, I saw some recent chatter on CRRnet about, how do you folks, what do you do for the, I said,
yeah.
that is something that we should do. And again, in Gwinnett, I put this on, our fire chief's desk and said, we have to do this because I don't want to end up having one of those massive conflagrations here in Grant
No, you're
County.
right. Like we had that fire in Charlotte, right? That
Hmm.
was what, a couple months ago.
Right.
And I talked to Ray Obraki with American Wood Council on NFPA 241 and construction fire safety. And it's such a great topic in the sense to be able to, it's there, the tools are available, and just being able to share that. And like, as you mentioned, that discussion's been had now on the CRR net.
Right.
And so I know that there's a lot of people looking for those resources because it's so vitally important because we understand the risk there, right? These buildings are typically in a frame state, and how do we better protect it? How do we reduce that risk, not only for the construction workers, but also firefighters that are going to respond to
Right.
those locations. And so now you hit on CRRNet. Can you explain? Or actually, I, I, I feel like I forget to ask some leading questions ahead of time. We should probably talk about what the Vision 2020 project is. We talked a little bit about it, but can you talk about the goals and objectives of Vision 2020 and what it is, and where can people find Vision 2020?
So the biggest thing there is everybody thinks we're an organization. We are not. Vision 2020 is actually a project of the Institution of Fire Engineers, the USA branch. They were gracious enough to be the host agency. 15 years ago, how this all started was there was a group of people sitting around a table, and they said, there's got to be a better way.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, they wanted to apply for some grant funding to do some do some early work with these strategies. And so IFE USA was gracious enough to do that. And to this day, they're still our host agency, and we love them for that. And what they've done, to support really, community risk reduction across the United States is commendable.
Mm-hmm.
As far as Vision 2020, if you want to find us, strategicfire.org is our website. Our goals and mission, really the goal or the mission of Vision 2020 is to incorporate the principles and practices of community risk reduction across the U.S. Fire Service. Now, when you think about that goal, it is incredibly difficult to sort of wrap your arms around a
Mm-hmm.
30,000 fire department approach. Now, we've identified some strategies to help that. We can talk about that later.
Yep.
But what we do is identify gaps, and we have 6 different strategies. We have advocacy, we have education and outreach, we have culture, there's technology, codes and standards, as well as model performance. So those 6 guiding strategies really help us focus in these areas. And those strategies really haven't changed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe our focus has changed in what we're doing with the strategy, but
Right.
they were spot on. I'm telling you.
Mm-hmm.
There was actually 5. We added model performance because I think, from perspective of helping fire departments evaluate what they're doing, is it working? If it's not,
Right.
ask the question, right?
Yeah.
Ask
Yeah.
the question. If it's not working, why are we doing this, or what can we change to better evaluate and get the outcome we desire?
Yeah, and you talked about being able to evaluate, and we talk about that even in our public education. How are we evaluating to make sure that we're being effective, especially when we go into schools? Are we doing a pre and a post test to be able to kind of see what their knowledge base was before and what it is after? And so being able, and we talked a little bit about fire investigations, but it's also testing that hypothesis and that, at least establishing it and then testing it, right? Being able to see if that outcome, all the data, all the things that we collected, really it's a scientific method in the sense of what we're
Right.
doing here in community risk reduction is testing it at the end, making sure that everything that we collected ahead of time, and this is my hypothesis, and then I'm moving forward. So there is some carryover, and probably goes back to your time as your mathematics and computer science, right? Being able to pull that back out. Now we hit a little bit on CRRNet. Can you describe what that is and how? Because I'm part of it, and I see a lot of the discussion that is had amongst different fire code officials. But can you talk a little bit about that and what what it does and what it is?
So, CRR Net is hosted by Vision 2020, and it is really just a group of like-minded people that want, the opportunity to, find more information on a particular topic. I don't care what it is, if it's code-related information, if it's job descriptions, if it's evaluating programs. If it really doesn't matter, right? This is just a fantastic group of people. I think right now we're close to 4,000 folks in the group, so it continues to grow. Matter of fact, as we got on this call, I had somebody email me can you add 4 more people? I said, well, I don't add people. You can go to our website and sign up for it.
Yeah.
That way you can, remove yourself when if you decide, sometimes we get people say, well, I'm no longer in, in CRR, so can you remove me? And, our answer to that is, this is really discipline wide across the fire side. I don't care what you're doing,
Right.
unless you're leaving the fire service. But if, you're going back to operations, bring this knowledge with you there.
Absolutely.
And, there's, and I think that's one of the growth areas that we'll see. Early on, we looked a lot at smoke alarms and projects, home safety visits, and things like that. That has continued to evolve, right? Symposium, our event we hold every 2 years. The last 3 have been in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and that event is just off the charts good. The best of the best model programs in the nation. And they've continued to evolve. One of the biggest growth areas that I see on the horizon is really in EMS, community paramedicine, mobile integrated healthcare. There is so much ground that we can gain there.
Yeah.
But CRR Net is a great sounding board. If you need something, somebody's out there that has an answer for you.
And the question's probably already been asked. So if you get on the group, make sure to search because there's a lot of discussions that have already been there, and it's existed. I don't even know how long I've been on it, but I've gone back and then I've researched to try to find some different answers, and then I'll revive some conversations every once in a while. And there are a lot of people that are very active and like-minded individuals. That also want to have this strong desire to be able to, help others across the fire service, and that's what we truly do across the fire service, is being able to help others. And so I think that would be good. Now, challenges and opportunities. We have a lot of challenges. We have a lot of opportunities moving ahead. What are some kind of strategies that Vision 2020 is looking at as we talk about challenges and opportunities?
I think again, from the biggest standpoint is this piece of culture, right? We talked about culture a little bit. We'll see a big change in our culture strategy that's being built out right now, and it's focused by discipline. So if you're a fire chief, click here, because there's stuff for you there. If you're in operations, click here. If you're a fire investigator, if you're a fire inspector or a fire marshal, or if you're a fire and life safety educator, I think that's probably the biggest opportunity out there that we see, is helping others to embrace. How you go about that is, it's interesting to look at that from the perspective. See, most people would want to, think that safety is an important piece. It's really not. When I say that, I say that most respectfully, but I've done this for 40 years, knowing that, from a firefighter standpoint, they expect, listen, my battalion chiefs, my, folks in operations, fire chief, they should be focused on my safety, which they should. But we all know, right? The person that's most for your safety is a person looking you in the mirror.
Right.
So that's probably not going to drive them towards community risk reduction. Now, my take on it is very different. My goal, and I tell people this all the time, is that, listen, my goal is to make you the smartest person in the room. And how you do that is have a very deep understanding of your organization, of your response, your service area, your community. once you do, you look at things, you speak a different language, and people will notice that. Now,
Hmm.
again, the goal is to get you a seat at the table where decisions are made.
Right. Shape
Once,
policy, right?
yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
Once you get there, you need to know and understand where you are. And we've seen, more than one person hit the self-destruct button as soon as they got a seat at that table. So you have to understand
Yeah.
those premises. But that's the biggest sort of growth area, the biggest opportunity. A challenge standpoint, culture is obviously a big piece of the challenge. The data piece as well,
Hmm.
advocacy, right? Having folks sort of fight for um, you know, money, time, funding, whatever, towards that focuses not just solely on response. And
Right.
if you talk firefighters, there's probably not many firefighters out there that are have a big focus. And again, I'm saying the quiet powder out loud here, right? There's not probably a big focus on reducing fires. If you talk to firefighters, they like to go to fires, and I know I was one, right? I'll say those things out loud, but I think that in the grand scheme of things, when you look at that from a different perspective, if you look at slips, trips, and falls, right, is that important to people? I think it becomes important when that person's your mother that fell,
Yeah.
right? And,
Yep.
and and understanding that and how it impacts people's lives long term. I don't care if it's a fire, if it's fall. Woman
Right.
that falls and breaks her hip, it 70 years old. It's really the start of the end of her life, and
Yep.
so those are there's so many opportunities out there, and I think the the best part of my job is getting to work with like-minded people across the nation, right? And from
Hmm.
all different organizations that can see the value here and really can help push that message as well.
Right. And I think that, like you just hit on, that aspect of, fires and those types of things. We've done a really good job about reducing fires over the years. I think that we still have fires, they still occur, but we've done a much better job reducing the impact. I mean, I would say probably anywhere from the early foundation of this country up until probably the 50s, the 60s, and even into the 70s. But we've seen maybe a little bit better, protection, a little bit better code enforcement, a little bit better, trying to enhance that built environment. And we talk about data. Where are our calls, right? Right. A lot of our calls now are some of those EMS driven things that we talk about. That's a good area or an area of opportunity for us to explore moving forward and taking a look at community risk reduction.
Yeah, and again, I would agree with you, right? 70s when the Bronx was burning, right?
Yeah.
You read the books probably. The dynamics have changed over the years, right?
Yeah.
While we've seen a great reduction in the number of fires, fire fatalities are actually going up. Now
Yeah.
that I explain this to people all the time. Listen, that's not the fire department's fault. That is, that's a product of the built environment that we live in now.
Hmm.
And to support those things that are needed there, support working smoke alarms in your community. I think are extremely important. That is really the first level of defense. So from that perspective, those changes that have occur and they will continue to occur, right? The
Yeah.
things that you do or we're doing now, 20 years from now, I tell new firefighters all the time, don't think this job's going to be the same in 20 years. It's not.
No, not at all.
Technology will catch up with us
Yeah.
at one point.
Yeah, and I mean, really, even since I began my career, I began in 2004. I think
Mhm.
I have to really kind of think back. It's been a while, but thinking back about the early days of just my fire code enforcement and how things have just changed, and really my experience level and my knowledge of code and just risk reduction principles and practices has changed significantly. And like you mentioned, in 15 years, there's been a lot of change associated with, just community risk reduction in and of itself. and we continue to add to it. And speaking of adding to it, we talked a little bit about the fire chiefs and the chief officers, and now I know Vision 2020 has a new program, CRR for what is it? CRR for the chief officers,
Mhm.
chief fire officers. What's the primary lessons or the takeaways, and really the goal of that program?
Yeah, so that came about. We saw the need from that, or the need for that course. Probably around 2020 time frame. So we really need to build this out. That coming out of EFO program at the National Fire Academy, we had a whole decades full of chief fire officers that were exposed to community risk reduction in that second year. The changes there at the National Fire Academy with the EFO program said really this needs to continue on. We need to
Hmm.
have that discussion with chief officers. And while we didn't call it CR for fire chiefs, because our goal is to reach a little deeper into the organization
Hmm.
to help them sort of understand these concepts, these principles, these practices, and really take out the myth of what they think think CRR is.
Right.
Right. There's a lot of organizations that changed the name of their fire prevention, fire marshal's office to the CRR division,
Hmm.
and you know that again was part of the problem. Right. We see this. It continues to be a discussion where, hey, well, that's not my job. That's their job. And in reality, it's everybody's job in the fire
Right.
department. And the CRR CEO is the person that sits in the big seat at the top.
Hmm.
And I think having that discussion gives gives them a better understanding that how this can be applied
Right.
across their organization. And in that class, I really love that class. It has some difficult discussions in there, things that people just don't want to talk about. And the reason they don't want to talk about them is they don't have a good answer, right?
Yeah.
Right. When we talk about fire fatalities, the fact is that time is not on our side. If we have a
Hmm.
fire in the middle of the night, um, most of the time, those people have perished before we turn a wheel in the firehouse. That's just a fact of life. And I get it. I understand people don't want to have that, you're right, that discussion, but we need to, roll with that to say, okay, how do we get a better outcome
Right.
for our community? And I think that's the long-term goals is that's what we want to see. People have more focus on the community, not just the
Hmm.
organization.
Yeah, like you just said, making it a better outcome.
Mhm.
How do we make things a better outcome? Anywhere from fires to false trips and those types of things, or even EMS related incidents, motor vehicle collisions. All of those things are definitely things that how do we make it a better outcome? And I think overall, I think we all are doing it. Just we all, I think about just my personal risk, right? How do I make wise decisions based on the given facts? And so, and sometimes they're very complex problems that we're trying to solve. And I think that we're trying to do the best that we can to be able to make or identify better outcomes. Now, speaking of outcomes, so the model performance criteria is one of those guides that is available on the Vision 2020
Mhm.
website. What is the model performance criteria, and what should fire departments or public safety agencies be focusing on when using the model performance criteria?
So in this, if you look at any program in which we're trying to, reduce risk, using model performance criteria, and those are four pieces of formative, process, impact, and outcome. When we look at the data and we identify whatever the problem is, don't care if it's reducing the number of fire fatalities in your community, whether it's reducing, number of commercial building fires,
Hmm.
um, identifying what the scope of that problem is, and then creating a simple problem statement, right? And this
Mm-hmm.
is that document really walks you through this. If you have a problem and it has all these moving parts, it gets much tougher to solve, right?
Right.
There's so many variables
Yep.
when we look at fires, anyways. It almost makes it impossible to come up with a solution. That's why people don't evaluate what they do. When you can make that a very concise statement, or say, listen, I want to look at reducing fires in my community, but I'm not going to say just fires. I want to reduce fires in multifamily homes,
Right.
right? That allows us to sort of zero in on the scope and say, okay, how can we do this? Where are these fires starting in multifamily homes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And knowing it better, right? The formative piece. Here's
Right.
what we want to do. The process. This
Mm-hmm.
is what we did. Whether it's educating people, whether it's all those pieces of the puzzle, making engineering changes in multifamily homes, and then towards an impact. What's the impact we had?
Mm-hmm.
These are the things that made impact. Doesn't necessarily get you to correlate to the outcome you desire. It
Right.
should. It
Yep.
should if you design the program right. But
Yep.
right, and then the outcome right of reducing. And we tell people let's be realistic here. Let's don't say I'm gonna prevent all fires in my community. You're
Right.
never going to do that.
Yeah.
But if you can bring some realistic view, listen, I'm going to reduce this by 10% over the next 3 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like we talked about it, being able to set measurable, criteria, and then being able to, measure against it, and identify I think I read something, and I'm trying to think. I think I read it in that document, but there is going to be some miscues and some things that we're going to have to change over time, and that's part of the CRR process. Is identifying that we may implement a strategy, but it may not have the desired effect. It may not reduce it significantly enough for us to be able to say that we were successful. So. With that being said, though, then we're going to explore new initiatives to be able to help us better
Right.
address that. And I think that that's one of those things that having that measurable objective, then you can, be able to compare against it is vitally important.
That's why that 6-step process is a circle, right?
Yeah. Yep.
If we don't get the outcome we desire, where did we go wrong? What can we change? And the change is a big piece of this.
Yeah.
Rarely are you going to get everything right on the first go round, right?
Right.
I know in the programs that we created, we were continually going back saying this doesn't work. We got to change this, and that's okay, right? And once you know that, acknowledge that. It's not failure, right? It's just understanding
Right.
there's a better way to do this than we originally thought. And
Right.
again, with that model performance, we talked about fires, but listen, that we can use that same model performance criteria to evaluate, firefighter injuries and what we're doing
Yeah.
with that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much as we talk about risk reduction. We can't keep talking about how it is a holistic approach, but truly it is. It's a holistic approach across everything that we do within the fire service and really just public safety in general. Now, one of the things and I'm kind of excited to see it on the website, was the CRR Academy. It just says coming soon. So can you talk a little bit about what the CRR Academy is? I'm curious, and I was definitely intrigued when I was trying to get some more information on the website.
So CRR Academy is our new LMS. From Vision 2020 standpoint, we know delivering courses in person is probably the best way
Hmm.
to get people to the highest level of knowledge, KSAs, knowledge, skills, abilities that they can get to. However, we also understand doing it in person is expensive, right? And
Yeah.
there's limited funds. We're totally grant funded. Vision 2020 does not sell anything, right? Anything we do, anything we create, training, guides, tools, we give away free to the fire service. So that I think was a challenge for us, right? We saw so many requests for these types of training,
Hmm.
and this allows us to sort of get out and get these training aspects, and it'll have webinars. It'll have CRR radio on there.
Mm-hmm.
All our guides will be on there as well. So you mentioned CRR for chief fire officers. There's also a companion course, CRR for local government officials,
Okay.
and our 1-day workshop, the data collection analysis class, which for us it was the best thing I think we've ever done in the history of this organ, this project. We know the success rate 96%, 96% for that course. And I was just talking earlier with Esri, and I said, listen, the 4% when they wash out of that, sort of, because they weren't prepared. We've taken people with what I would call very low knowledge with working with Word or Excel, and they get to where they can map things, they can
Mm-hmm.
create charts and graphs. So again, I think CRR Academy is really a great answer. The innovation part, right? The ability to say, listen, this is a problem now. Let's fix it now. Let's not wait a year and a half to get a course
Right.
developed. And when I'll give you this example, right? When COVID hit, we sat around. We knew, man, this is going to be a real challenge for fire departments. And so COVID hit right around March 1st,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everything shut down in 2020. We know because we had the symposium the week before that. And by March 15th, Vision 2020 had the first COVID library for policies, procedures, and it still sits out there, to be honest with you, off our website. You could find it. But and it had hundreds of policies from organizations across the nation. So, the agility and the speed in which we can do things and the cost is just incredibly attractive. And that's why we try to be a very good steward of grant funded monies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we know they're hard to come by. And I think CRR Academy lets us reach out and even get to exponential growth with our trainings.
Right. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't maybe, with this being not only just fire code officials, and we've been very fire code heavy or fire safety or fire service heavy in this discussion, but as we talk about our building officials, our other code enforcement partners, and working with those individuals as we talk about regulation in the built environment, what type of, as we talk about community risk reduction, how do we, continue to, build partnerships and then, and help them be able to kind of help us work together in regards to community risk reduction? Like you said, local government officials. I'm imagining that may also touch on maybe some other city or county or local government officials that might be able to help us take a look at community risk and be able to minimize it or reduce it.
Yeah, so this is all one big partnership, right? There's, if for a fire department to think that they can do this by themselves, yeah, you certainly can try. But the fact is, if you want to really move mountains, you're going to have to partner and collaborate with folks from across the board. I don't care if that's EMA, if you have a separate building department official, right? Doesn't matter who it is, the American Red Cross in your community, faith-based organizations, right? There's probably people in your community that don't look like you and don't speak the same language. Well, you better have somebody that can sort of bridge that gap, right? Bridging and bonding is an important discussion when we're talking partnerships. And I think bringing those people into the fold, right? Sitting down with a risk assessment and having discussions on how, right, where are the avenues where we can create a healthy, safe, resilient community is truly important.
Well, and they may be able to, I think you just kind of hit on it too. They may be able to help us identify blind spots that we may have because we think through a different lens, right? We look at a problem maybe through a different perspective than what they may look at it. And they may, and likely will have good input to that problem as part of that CRA.
Yeah, and again, fire department, we're problem solvers, right?
Right.
If
Yep.
I always told folks, I told this story all the time that there seems to be a disconnect between fire headquarters and the people in operations. I said, well, yeah, you have to understand why that exists, right? It's a communications issue within the organization. We all have it. When firefighters go out in an engine and there's a guy in a hole, and there three of them get off the engine and look in the hole, their focus is to find a safe way to get that person out of the hole. They're probably going to come up with three different ways. When the fire chief goes there and looks in that hole, he's probably saying, why is the guy in the hole? And when I went there, I'd say, how can I prevent somebody else from falling in the hole, right? So
Right.
you're right. Different perspectives is absolutely true, right? The lens that the lens we see things through, and there's times when you're going to have to work on problems that aren't yours.
Yeah.
I think that's an important piece of partnerships, right? You're going to
Yep.
have to look at things, right? I remember being in Gwinnett and would continually, right, with very large school district, fifth largest school district in the nation, and understanding that, boy, if I want to solve some of these other problems, I have to help them solve this one.
Yeah.
And so that partnership discussion is so critical to
Yep.
your success. The more partners you can, and it really, the robust, what you build from bringing in partners is going to be so much bigger, so much better.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of, right? It's just like managing people. You got to manage your relationships.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that that's going to be ultimately to be able to build a good, risk reduction across the city, across the county, across the state. Those are all different things that you got to be able to work together with partners because it is important as we talk about community risk reduction. Now, one of the things I got just a couple more questions because it looks like we're almost out of time, but we talk about resources. There's a couple resources that are out there. You have the material, social media is big, right? So CRR or Vision 2020 has a materials generator that folks can definitely take advantage of, and I think that those are things. Can you talk a bit about where they can find that and what services that are offered?
So CRR, we call it MatGen now, right? So we shortened the name on it and relaunched it. Went in and did a whole bunch of updates to the material there. So CRR generator is something. If you have a certain topic, you can go to CRR or the MatGen and generate flyers. You can door hangers, anything that you want regarding these specific topics. The materials put together for you. You can brand it to your organization. You can print it out free. It comes, print ready. So everything there again is free. You can find it on our website. If you go across the title bar, you'll see Matt Jen up there. Just simply log on, and if you're looking to do outreach in multifamily homes or single family homes or for cooking fires or whatnot, the information's there. You select the topic, you can change the pictures out. It's very effective. My goal, and I'll mention this because this is important audience for this, is I said, listen, we're only using a small piece of this, right? If we look from a code enforcement perspective, there's probably a lot of pieces that we could generate and put up there where people can go grab it and brand it to their organization, whether they're topics regarding code enforcement and things like that.
Yeah, and I'm a big user, and not that I'm promoting the product, but a big user of Canva.
Hmm.
And so I use that for a lot of social media things and build graphics. It would be fantastic if there was some type of tie-in there, because I'm sure that the Matt Gen program has some good capabilities, but I use a lot of Canva. Seems like I'm on there every day doing something a little bit different. But or AI, right? Being able to
Right.
utilize AI now to be able to build some of these things.
So, I mean, now that I got a captive audience here, we'll be looking for help to build this out on the, fire inspections, code enforcement realm.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a committee, right?
Yeah,
We need to assemble everybody to sit down and start taking a look at this a little bit more. Maybe we can bring in some IT, professionals,
that's right.
from around the area. So, um, one other thing that I want to talk about, and it's coming very, very soon. We're in October, and October a lot of times is Fire Prevention Week or Fire
Mhm.
Prevention Month, but week truly it is. But we recognize fire prevention, throughout the month of October, but Community Risk Reduction Week. When is Community Risk Reduction Week? And I want to say this is going to be the fourth anniversary of Community Risk Reduction Week.
That is correct. So it always, forgive me, I don't know the exact day, because it kicks off on Martin Luther King
Mm-hmm.
Day of Service.
All
So
right.
every year that's when it starts, and the focus there, right, is really to incorporate when we look at these intervention strategies, right? A lot of people call them the 5 E's, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's education, engineering, enforcement, economic incentives, or emergency response. Every year, what has changed is the focus for CRR Week,
Right.
which is based under our advocacy strategy. Chris Burnett from Colorado heads it up. He's got a great team of folks.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a homegrown effort, right, that started at one of the symposiums. They sat down and said, well, geez, we have a fire prevention week. Why don't we have a CRR week?
Right.
And that was sort of grew out of that. And then, you know, they just needed additional support. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what the time when we said, listen, we would love to help and bring this under the project. So we've done that with a number of things. We've done that with Y-Fires, Youth Fire Siting Intervention
Mm-hmm.
database, but CRR Week is just incredible group of folks that help drive this CRR message.
Mm-hmm.
They have a number of focuses that they do, but again, this one coming up is on enforcement. So it'll be
Okay.
a topic, right? For this
Yeah.
year in 2024, January
Yeah.
2024, the focus will be in enforcement. So this is a
Yeah.
great plug for this group of listeners here.
Yeah, and I think that we one of the things there's also a building safety month that we talk about within ICC, and I think really code professionals across the country and really across the world talk about May being building safety month, and they take a week each month or a week for the month of May and talk about things, and I think this enforcement piece, we talk about enforcement sometimes. When we talk about enforcement, people think that we're fining people. That's not what we talk about a lot of times with enforcement. A lot of times I pair it with education. I think in education and enforcement, there is a chance to be able to kind of pair those two things together a lot of times. And so, but I'll be interested to see, as we start to look at that, and we'll be checking out the website to see how that gets rolled out and all the different tools and things that are available to us.
Yeah, again, that group of folks is just really focused at helping driving that message and getting people engaged. They've got the website where you can upload. There's proclamations that
Mm-hmm.
states do, that communities do,
Yeah.
to support CRR Week. And again, you hit it on the head, right? With
Yeah.
taking each of these pieces from an enforcement standpoint, right? That's just part of the job.
Yeah.
When we look at compliance, there's two ways. There's two pieces to compliance. We can get people to comply. We've got the tools to do that. We can bring them to court. We can get issue
Right.
whatever. But that is not the
That doesn't help for the
desired
long term, right?
way we want to do that. We want
Yeah.
voluntary compliance. We do that
Right.
with education. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time on this very, critical topic, and I think that this is one that I think a lot of folks are definitely going to listen to and adhere to. If they want to find more information about Vision 2020 and yourself, where can they find more information, and where can they, maybe engage with Vision 2020?
So again, strategicfire.org is our website. I encourage everybody to go there. We talked about CRRnet. You can sign up for CRRnet there. It's under CR Connect. You go down, you'll see CRRnet there. You click on that, and it'll take you to a link to add yourself. We're always looking for folks to get involved with the project, right? Our strategy groups. We've got a codes and standards strategy group. So if you have any interest there, we can put you in touch. Those folks, I know from the ICC perspective, Carl Fippinger is on that group as well. NFPA is there as well. UL is there. So it's just a really good group of folks doing, and it's just not one strategy, right? They cross pollinate with advocacy or outreach and education or culture in model performance. There's a lot of back and forth. That's just not a straight line between the two. So you can see us on social media, strategicfire.org on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And I appreciate the time today. I really do.
Yeah.
I know this is an important group. You do important work, and we look forward to seeing you and seeing our traffic on our website, and get engaged with us. We just we love to see you be part of the solution.
We'll make sure to share all of that information in the show notes, so that way everybody can take click on the links. And like you said, let's increase the traffic. Let's start looking at these things, and let's start leveraging these resources. Let's it's available. It's one of those things that, we've talked about. Most of this, I think everything's free. So, leverage those resources. Stephen, I really appreciate the time. Until next time, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.